The small cafe on Arcturus 9 sat on the corner of a busy street where airships drifted silently overhead, and sunlight shimmered through a haze of purple mist. The cafe was called the Silver Drop, a quiet place where travelers stopped to rest, talk, and taste things from 100 worlds. The air inside smelled of spice, fruit, and metal, everything that didn't exist together on any one planet except this one. Behind the counter, Tarala, the young waitress, polished a glass with her lower set of arms while holding a data pad with the upper pair. Her silver-blue scales reflected the soft neon light. Her people, the Valar, were known for their calm voices, gentle hearts, and long patience. She loved her job. It was peaceful, predictable, and safe. Every day was the same. Early light, familiar faces, soft laughter. But that morning, everything changed. The doorbell chimed, and every head turned. A tall figure stepped inside, and the cafe fell silent. The smell changed. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. It was a human. Tarala had seen humans before, on news feeds, in old war stories and documentaries about the young species that refused to die, but never in person. The man who entered wore an old Earth military jacket, the fabric frayed at the edges, a faint symbol of wings on the shoulder. His hair was dark, his skin tanned, and his eyes, those strange, deep human eyes, looked tired but kind. He walked to the counter and smiled. "Morning," he said, voice low and warm. Tarala blinked. She had studied hundreds of alien languages, but human speech had a roughness to it, a rhythm that sounded alive. "Good morning," she replied softly, her frills tightening in nervousness. "Welcome to the Silver Drop. What would you like to drink?" The man looked at the menu briefly. "Just coffee," he said. Tarala froze. "Black coffee?" "Yeah," he said, smiling as if it was the simplest thing in the universe. Her lower hands twitched. On Arcturus 9, coffee, real, pure human coffee, was a controlled substance. To most species, it was a near-toxic stimulant, far too strong for their systems. Even diluted versions were used only for night shift guards or long-distance pilots. "You want undiluted?" she asked, unsure if she heard right. He nodded. "That's how we drink it back home." There was no arrogance in his tone, only quiet certainty. Something about that made her chest tighten with curiosity and a small flicker of fear. Still, she obeyed. Tarala turned and prepared the drink carefully, hands trembling slightly. The scent of roasted beans filled the cafe, sharp and bitter, cutting through the soft floral air like lightning through a calm sky. The other customers, the insectoid Draxian couple, the soft-furred Lenari merchant, whispered nervously, watching the human. She placed the cup before him. The dark liquid shimmered faintly in the light. "Be careful," she murmured. The man, his name tag read Sergeant James Holt, nodded in thanks. He lifted the cup, inhaled deeply, and smiled. Then, without hesitation, he drank it down in one long swallow. Tarala's eyes widened. He didn't cough. He didn't even blink. He just set the cup down and sighed, as if it was water. "That hits the spot," he said softly. For a moment, Tarala forgot how to breathe. Her forehands trembled so hard she almost dropped the glass she was holding. Around her, the cafe had gone completely still. You drank all of it?" she whispered. Holt looked at her, puzzled. "Sure, why?" "That was pure caffeine extract," she said, voice rising. One sip could stop a Velar's heart. He smiled, almost apologetically. "Guess I'm built different." The other customers stared, whispering in awe. Holt didn't seem to notice. He simply looked down at the empty cup and said calmly, "Can I get another?" Tarala's jaw dropped. You can do it again already?" "Of course," he said with a light laugh. "Back on Earth, we call this a refill." Her vision blurred. The last thing she saw was that calm human smile, so confident, so casual, so terrifying in its simplicity. And then, Tarala fainted. The cafe erupted in panic. The Lenari merchant rushed to help, and the Draxians buzzed in alarm. Holt jumped up instantly, catching her before she hit the ground. Hey, easy now," he said, lowering her gently onto a chair. Guess that was too much excitement for one morning. He looked around at the staring crowd and sighed. "What?" "I just wanted coffee." Outside, the purple sun of Arcturus 9 rose a little higher, painting the cafe windows gold. Inside, one alien lay unconscious and one human sat quietly beside her, sipping the strongest drink in the galaxy like it was nothing at all. And that was the morning the Silver Drop Cafe and everyone in it learned the first. Small thing about humanity. They weren't the biggest. They weren't the strongest. But somehow they could always go again. When Tarala opened her eyes again, everything was blurry. The ceiling lights of the cafe looked like little suns and her head felt heavy. She blinked a few times until the shapes around her became clear. Someone was leaning close, two brown eyes filled with concern. "Hey there," said a warm voice. "You back with us?" It was the human. The same one who had drunk that impossible drink. Twice. Tarala sat up quickly, then winced as her head spun. Her 4 hands went to her temples. What happened?" "You fainted," Holt said softly. "I caught you before you hit the floor. Don't worry, you're okay." Tarala looked around. The cafe was quieter now. The other customers had gone, leaving only the smell of coffee and curiosity behind. She could still see the empty cup on the table, the proof of what he had done. "You really drank that whole cup," she said, voice shaking. He nodded. "Yeah, sorry if that scared you." "Scared me?" She stared at him with wide eyes. That was pure stimulant. Most species would lose consciousness or worse. Holt rubbed the back of his neck and smiled awkwardly. "Guess humans are wired a little differently." Tarala looked at him closely, as if trying to understand what he was made of. His hands looked ordinary, his heartbeat sounded normal, and yet there was something about him that didn't fit into the quiet order of her world. She sat in silence for a while, just watching him sip the last drops from his second cup as calmly as if it were water. Finally, she asked, "Why? Why would you drink something like that? Doesn't it hurt?" He laughed softly. "Sometimes it does, but we drink it anyway." "Why?" She pressed. "No one needs that much energy. No one needs to push their body so far." He leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. The sunlight coming through the window caught his face, showing faint scars, small white lines that told silent stories. "Because that's what we do," he said after a moment. "We push, it's kind of who we are." Tarala frowned. "That makes no sense," he smiled gently. "It doesn't have to. On Earth, we grew up in a world that didn't care if we were comfortable. Our planet froze, burned, flooded, shook. We had to fight the world just to live. We learned to adapt, to keep going no matter what." His words were simple, but the way he said them made her chest feel heavy. "You mean your world was dangerous?" she asked. "Dangerous," he said with a short laugh, "was our normal. But it taught us something important. Pain doesn't mean stop. Sometimes it means move faster." Tarala looked down at her trembling hands. Her people were raised in safety under calm skies. They valued peace, art, and comfort. To suffer was considered a sign of failure. Yet here was a creature who treated struggle like air, something to live in. "You could have died," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, eyes soft. "But if you live your life afraid to try, are you really alive?" She didn't know what to say to that. Outside, the purple sunlight dimmed slightly as clouds drifted across the sky. Inside the cafe, silence stretched between them, gentle and strange. Holt broke it with a small laugh. "Didn't mean to cause a scene. I just missed real coffee. Been off-world too long, I guess. You mean..." She hesitated. "You've been fighting?" He nodded once. "Yeah, a few tours. I'm retired now, trying to remember what normal feels like." Tarala looked at him with new eyes. She saw the tiredness under his smile, the weight behind the calm. The human who laughed after drinking poison wasn't fearless. He was simply used to surviving. She felt something stir inside her chest, something like admiration mixed with sadness. "You're kind," she said softly. "You never stop, do you?" He smiled, that quiet human smile again. "We stop when we have to. But even then, part of us keeps going." He stood, pulling on his old jacket. "Thanks for the coffee. Sorry about the fainting thing." She blinked, still dazed. "Wait, you're leaving?" "Just for now," he said. "You need rest, and I've got a few things to take care of." As he reached the door, Tarala called out, "Will you come back?" Holt turned slightly, his silhouette framed by the golden light outside. "Yeah," he said with a small grin. "I'll come back. Maybe next time you can tell me what's strong enough to knock you out." And with that, the door closed behind him. Tarala sat there for a long time, staring at the empty coffee cup still on the counter. The smell of it clung to the air, a bitter, human scent of heat and daring. For the first time in her life, she wondered what it must feel like to live without fear of limits. That night, as she closed the cafe, she found herself whispering a strange new thought. Maybe impossible isn't as real as we think. The next morning, Tarala arrived at the Silver Drop Cafe earlier than usual. The city outside was still half asleep, the skies painted in pale pink and soft gold. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, the smell of coffee beans and warm metal filling the air. She tried to focus on her morning routine, wiping tables, setting cups, checking the grinder, but her thoughts kept wandering back to the strange human who had walked into her quiet world yesterday. Sergeant James Holt. She whispered his name under her breath, as if testing the sound. It was short, strong, and oddly gentle at the same time. Just like him, her co-workers had teased her all morning. "You fainted in front of a customer," one said, laughing. "You'll never live that down." But Tarala didn't mind the jokes. What she couldn't stop thinking about wasn't the embarrassment. It was the look in Holt's eyes when he spoke about his home. A world that fought him every day, and yet he called it home. That thought stayed with her. By the time the cafe opened, she found herself glancing at the door more often than usual. She told herself it was just curiosity, just wanting to understand. And then, just as the morning rush ended, the doorbell chimed. He was back. Same jacket. Same quiet smile. Same calm presence that made the air feel heavier and warmer at the same time. "Morning," he said. Tarala blinked once, her frills fluttering nervously. "You came back." "Of course," he said, walking to the counter. "You promised me another cup, remember?" Her heart skipped a beat. "I didn't promise anything," she said quickly. "You just nearly gave me a heart failure last time." He chuckled. "Fair enough. I'll go easy on the caffeine today." She served him a gentler blend this time, something close to tea, but he still drank it with the same peaceful satisfaction. Watching him, she finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been sitting in her chest since yesterday. "Holt," she began carefully, "yesterday you said humans push because that's who they are. What did you mean by that?" He looked up from his cup. His eyes were steady like a calm sea that hid deep storms underneath. "Well," he said, thinking, "on Earth we don't really get to stop when things get hard. We're small compared to other species. We break easily. We get tired, but we keep going anyway. That's kind of our thing. But why?" she asked softly. "Why not rest when you can? Why not stay in peace?" He smiled faintly. "Because peace doesn't last unless someone fights to protect it." His words made her fall silent. He took another slow sip before continuing. "When I was younger, I served during the frontier wars. There were days we had no food, no light, no sleep. We'd crawl through mud, carrying each other just to make it to morning, and every time we thought we couldn't go any further." He paused, eyes distant. Someone always whispered, "Just one more step." That's how we survived. One step at a time. Tarala felt her throat tighten. She couldn't imagine a world where every sunrise had to be earned. "You must have lost people," she said quietly. He nodded. "Yeah, too many." His voice was low, almost a whisper. "But that's why I came here. I just wanted a quiet place. A good cup of coffee. A reminder that not everything has to be a battle." Tarala looked at him with soft eyes. "You carry a lot inside you." He smiled again, but this time it was tired. "We all do. Humans just learn to walk with it." For a while, neither of them spoke. The hum of the machines and the gentle clink of cups filled the silence. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, making soft patterns against the glass. Tarala finally broke the silence. "Your kind amazes me," she said. "You live in pain, in danger, yet you find joy in the smallest things." "Like coffee," Holt laughed quietly. "Yeah, that's the trick. If you can smile while the world's burning, the fire loses some of its power." She tilted her head. "That's a very human thing to say." "Maybe," he said, standing up and putting a few coins on the counter. "Or maybe it's just the way we've learned to survive." He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, Tarala called out softly, "Holt." He looked back. "I'd like to hear more about your home, about your people, about Earth." A slow smile spread across his face. "Then I guess I'll have to come back again." The doorbell chimed as he stepped outside into the rain, disappearing into the misty streets. Tarala stood at the window watching him go, the reflection of the falling water rippling across her silver scales. She didn't know why, but her heart felt warmer than it had in years. She whispered to herself, "Maybe strength isn't about being unbreakable. Maybe it's about choosing to keep going even when you are." And outside, the rain kept falling softly, like the quiet applause of the universe for one small human who refused to stop. Days turned into weeks, and the Silver Drop Cafe became a little brighter each time Sergeant Holt walked in. The doorbell's soft chime always made Taralla's heart skip, though she never admitted it. He didn't always come for coffee. Sometimes he just sat quietly by the window, staring at the sky as if searching for something far away. Other times he told stories, little things about life on Earth that fascinated Taralla more than she expected. She learned that humans had oceans so wide they could hide the horizon, and mountains that scraped the edge of the sky. She learned that rain could fall for days and snow could bury cities in silence. She learned that humans sang when they were sad, laughed when they were scared, and kept walking even when their feet bled. One quiet evening when the cafe was almost empty, Taralla found herself sitting across from Holt at his usual corner table. A single light hung above them, casting a warm glow on their faces. "Tell me more," she said softly, "about your home, about why humans became this way." Holt smiled faintly, turning the cup in his hands. "You really want to know?" She nodded. "Yes, I think I need to." He leaned back, eyes distant. "All right then," he began. "Earth wasn't kind to us. We weren't born in paradise like your people. We were born between fire and ice. The ground shook, the skies burned. The oceans tried to swallow us whole. For every good season there was a bad one waiting to take it away." He paused, his voice growing quieter. "Our ancestors had to fight for everything. Food, warmth, safety. They built fires in the cold and shelters from storms. Sometimes they failed. Many times they died. But every time they fell, someone stood up again. Someone always stood up again." Taralla listened, her four hands folded on the table. She could almost see the pictures his words painted. The red fires glowing in the dark. The humans huddled together under rough shelters, their eyes reflecting both fear and determination. "That sounds terrible," she whispered. Holt smiled a little. "It was, but it made us what we are. When you grow up in a world that keeps trying to break you, you learn to bend without shattering. You learn that pain isn't the end. It's the beginning of strength." Taralla tilted her head. "On my world, pain means something is wrong. We heal it. We stop. You embrace it." He chuckled softly. "Yeah, I guess we do. Because every scar tells a story. Every bruise means you tried. We wear them like medals." There was silence for a moment, the kind that felt heavy but not uncomfortable. Outside, the purple sun of Arcturus was sinking below the horizon, turning the clouds gold and violet. Taralla spoke again, her voice trembling just a little. "Doesn't it hurt? Living like that? Always fighting?" Holt looked down at his cup, then back at her. "It does, every day. But the hurt reminds us we're alive. You see, Taralla, we don't chase pain. We chase meaning. If something's worth doing, even if it hurts, we'll still do it." She watched him quietly, trying to understand a kind of strength that wasn't about muscles or weapons, but about heart. He continued, his voice softer now. "That's why we explore, why we go to the stars. We get scared, tired, lost, but we keep moving. Because deep down we believe that beyond the pain, beyond the fear, there's something better waiting, something worth it." Taralla felt something warm rise in her chest, a feeling she couldn't name. Maybe it was admiration. Maybe it was sorrow. Maybe both. "You sound like your people are made of hope," she said. Holt smiled faintly. "Maybe we are. Hope and caffeine." She laughed, a quiet, musical laugh that made his tired smile grow brighter. But as the laughter faded, her expression softened again. "You've lost so much, and still you look at the stars and smile. I don't think my kind could ever do that." "Maybe not yet," he said. "But that's the thing about strength. It's contagious." Taralla looked down at her reflection in the dark coffee and thought about those words. Maybe strength wasn't born in the easy places. Maybe it grew in the cracks, in the cold, in the silence between heartbeats. She looked up again and found him watching her. For a moment their eyes met, her bright silver ones and his deep brown. Two worlds, two hearts, one quiet understanding. When he stood to leave, she asked softly, "Will you come again tomorrow?" He nodded. "If you promise not to faint this time." She smiled shyly. "No promises." As he walked out into the fading light, Taralla stayed at the table long after, staring at the cup he had left behind. Inside it, a few drops of dark coffee shimmered like tiny galaxies, bittersweet, endless, alive. And in that moment, she finally understood what made humans different. They didn't survive in spite of the storm. They survived because of it. It had been several days since Tarala and Holt's last conversation. The cafe had grown busier lately. More travelers, more stories, but even with all the noise and colors, she found herself glancing at the door every time it chimed. And then, one bright afternoon, there he was again, Sergeant Holt, in that same worn jacket, carrying that same calm smile that made everyone else fade a little from the room. Tarala tried not to look too excited, but her frills fluttered anyway. "You're late," she teased softly. He grinned. "Didn't know I had a schedule." "You do now," she said with mock seriousness. He chuckled and took his seat by the window, the one that had quietly become his. She brought him his usual cup before he even asked. He thanked her and took a sip, sighing like someone coming home. After a quiet moment, he looked at her and said, "You know, I've been thinking. I keep coming here, drinking your human-style coffee. Maybe it's time you show me what you drink." Tarala blinked. "What we drink?" "Yeah, something strong. Something local." Her eyes widened. "Strong? Holt, our strongest blend isn't like your coffee. It's dangerous even for my kind." He smiled, that same fearless, boyish grin she was starting to recognize. "Perfect. Let's try it." She stared at him. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," he said, leaning back casually. "If I'm going to understand Arcturus, I should taste what the locals call strong." Tarala hesitated, her 4 hands fidgeting nervously. "It's called Karoth Essence. 1 sip is enough to knock out a grown vealer for hours. It's not for humans." He finished with a grin. "Guess there's only one way to find out." She groaned softly, but there was no stopping him now. "Fine," she said, folding her arms. "But if you collapse, I'm not carrying you out." He laughed. "Deal." She disappeared behind the counter and began to prepare the drink. Even from afar, the smell of Karoth Essence was overwhelming. A thick metallic sweetness mixed with something sharp, almost electric. The liquid shimmered like molten silver as she poured it into a small glass. The other workers noticed. A few stopped what they were doing to watch. Word spread quickly among the customers. The human was about to drink Karoth Essence. Tarala returned, holding the small cup carefully like it was a weapon. She set it down in front of him and stepped back. "Last chance to change your mind." Holt looked at the glowing drink, then up at her. "Wouldn't dream of it." And before she could say another word, he picked up the glass and drank it down in one smooth motion. The cafe went completely silent. Tarala froze. Everyone stared. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Holt set the empty cup on the table and exhaled slowly. He said. "Interesting flavor." "Interesting?" Tarala gasped. "You should be unconscious." He tilted his head, thinking. "Maybe a little warm. Kinda tingly, but not bad." And then, as if the universe wanted to add drama, a faint thump echoed. Tarala's knees gave out again. She fainted. When she woke up, it was déjà vu. The same light, the same voice, the same worried eyes. "Hey there," Holt said softly, crouched beside her again. "You okay?" Tarala groaned, rubbing her temples. "You drank it." "Yep," he said cheerfully. "Guess humans can handle your stuff too." She stared at him in disbelief. "You are absolutely insane." "Probably," he said with a grin. "But it was worth it." "Worth it?" she repeated, sitting up. "For what? To prove a point?" He shook his head. "No, to understand." Her frills fluttered in confusion. "Understand what?" He smiled gently. "Every species has something that tests them. For you, it's Karoth Essence. For us, it's the world we were born on. It's pain, exhaustion, fear, things we learn to face every day. I just wanted to see what your kind considers too much." Tarala's heart softened at his words. He wasn't showing off. He was connecting, trying to learn to bridge the space between them through something as small as a cup. She looked at him for a long moment, then laughed. A real, bright laugh that surprised even her. "You humans are impossible," he smiled. "Yeah, but that's kind of our thing." She shook her head, still smiling. "Next time I'm making you something safe." "Next time," he teased, her frills glowed faintly pink. "Don't push your luck." He chuckled and leaned back, raising his empty glass like a toast. "To impossible things," he said. She hesitated, then smiled back. "To humanity," she replied. And somewhere deep inside she realized something had changed. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something warmer, deeper. As Holt left the cafe that evening, the alien waitress watched him go, her heart quietly echoing his words, to impossible things. The sun was setting when the Silver Drop Cafe finally emptied. The purple light of Arcturus painted soft gold lines on the tables, and the faint hum of city airships echoed outside. Tralla sat across from Holt, still recovering from the shock of what he had done earlier. The empty glass of Karoth essence sat between them like silent proof of something unbelievable. "You really drank it," she said quietly. "No tricks. No special suit, just drank it." Holt smiled softly. "I told you humans are stubborn." "Stubborn?" she repeated. "That's more than stubborn. That's madness," he laughed lightly. "Sometimes madness keeps us alive." Tralla stared at him, trying to find the line between courage and foolishness. She couldn't. What she saw instead was something else, something her kind didn't have. A kind of strength that wasn't about power or control. It was the strength to keep moving even when you had every reason to stop. "You didn't do it to impress anyone, did you?" she asked finally. Holt shook his head. "No, I did it to remind myself who I am." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair, his gaze drifting toward the window where the last light of day touched the glass. "Back home, people like me, soldiers, workers, dreamers, we spend years fighting something. A storm, a war, a life that won't go easy. After a while, you start to forget why you keep going. You just do. So sometimes, you need to prove to yourself that you still can." Tralla's voice softened. "Even when it hurts?" "Especially when it hurts," he said. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper. "We were never taught to live that way," she admitted. "My people believe that peace means never feeling pain, never pushing too far. We build safety around our lives like walls." He looked at her gently. "And are you happy inside those walls?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes drifted toward the empty cafe, the quiet corners she'd cleaned 1,000 times. The same routine she'd lived every day without ever questioning it. "I thought I was," she whispered. "Until I met you." Holt smiled faintly. "We humans have that effect on people. We make them question things." She looked up at him, her silver eyes bright under the fading light. "You make me question what strength really means. Maybe it's not about being safe. Maybe it's about facing the fire and walking through it anyway." He nodded. "That's one way to put it. You see, endurance isn't about muscles or willpower. It's about hope. The belief that if you just take one more step, things can still get better." Tralla's chest felt tight. His words were simple, but they stirred something powerful inside her, something she had never felt before. She leaned forward slightly, speaking softly. "Do you ever get tired of being strong?" Holt looked at her for a long moment, then gave a small, sad smile. "Every day. But strength isn't about never being tired. It's about moving anyway." There was silence between them. Deep, comfortable silence. The kind that needed no words. The sound of the cafe lights buzzing faintly filled the space where language could not. Tralla finally broke it, her voice barely above a whisper. "You humans, you're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Loud warriors. Reckless explorers. People who never think before acting." He chuckled. "We can be that too." "But you," she said softly, "you're something else. You don't fight the world because you want to win. You fight because you want to live. There's a difference." Holt's eyes softened. "You're learning fast." "Maybe," she said, smiling a little. "Or maybe I just needed someone to show me what life really means." He looked away for a moment as if embarrassed by her sincerity. "Life means a lot of things," he said. "But mostly it means not giving up. Not on the world. Not on yourself." Outside, the lights of Arcturus City began to glow, painting reflections across the glass. For the first time since she met him, Tralla noticed that Holt looked lighter, as if something inside him had healed a little. "You're smiling," she said. "Yeah," he replied softly. "Guess it's been a while." They both laughed quietly, the sound mingling with the hum of the city. When it was time to close, Tralla stood beside him at the door. "Holt," she said gently, "and thank you for showing me the meaning of endurance." He looked at her, his expression kind but serious. "Thank you, Tralla, for reminding me why it matters." As he stepped outside into the cool night, she watched him go, her heart warm and full. And when the door closed behind him, she whispered into the quiet, "Maybe we're not so different after all." Outside, the stars of Arcturus 9 shimmered in the dark, like the sparks of a fire that refused to die. And somewhere beneath those stars, one human walked away with a small smile. And one alien waitress finally understood. Endurance isn't about surviving the storm. It's about learning to dance in the rain. The next few weeks passed like a quiet dream. Every morning, the Silver Drop Cafe opened its doors to the same gentle hum of life. Ships rose and fell from the port outside. Aliens from a dozen worlds came and went, and Tarala smiled and served them all. But each day she found herself waiting for the sound of one voice, the deep, calm human tone that always brought light into the room. Sergeant Holt didn't come for 3 days. On the 4th, he walked in. His jacket was cleaner, his steps heavier. There was something different about him, something final. Tarala's frills twitched nervously. "You're late again," she said softly, trying to sound casual. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry, I had to get clearance for transport." Her chest tightened. "Transport?" He nodded slowly. "The fleet's moving out. My rotation here is over." For a moment she couldn't speak. The words hit her like cold air. "You're leaving?" "Tomorrow morning," he said. "Back to the frontier." Tarala's hands trembled slightly as she placed his cup on the table. The sound of it touching the wood felt louder than anything else. "You didn't even tell me." He looked down at the cup. Didn't want to make it harder. She sat across from him, staring at the man who had changed her world with a few words, a few smiles, and one impossible act of courage. "You humans always do that," she said quietly. "You just walk into someone's life, turn everything upside down, and then leave." Holt looked up, his voice soft. "That's not what I wanted." "Then what did you want?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He hesitated. "I wanted to remind someone, to remind you, that courage doesn't always come from strength. Sometimes it comes from caring too much, from refusing to stop even when it hurts." Tarala looked down. Her eyes shimmered faintly. "And what about you? Who reminds you?" He smiled gently. "You just did." Her breath caught. There was silence between them again, thick and full, like the universe had paused to listen. Finally, she said softly, "You humans. You never stay still, do you?" He chuckled faintly. "Not for long. There's always another storm somewhere." "But aren't you tired of storms?" she asked, her voice breaking a little. He leaned back, gazing at the stars outside. "Sometimes. But storms make you remember you're alive." Her heart ached. "You'll forget me," she said suddenly, trying to sound light but failing. He looked at her, and for the first time since she met him, she saw something fragile in his eyes. "I won't." "Holt." He stood up slowly, placing a small metal coin on the table. It was marked with strange human symbols and a faded emblem. "A token," he said. "For my unit. We give it to people who change us." She stared at it, speechless. You can't give me this." "It's yours," he smiled softly. "Exactly." She wanted to say something, anything, but her throat tightened. He gave a small nod, turned toward the door, and began to walk away. The door chimed softly. He paused at the threshold and looked back one last time. "Tarala," he said quietly. She blinked, her eyes shimmering. "Yes?" He smiled, warm, tired, and human. "You can do it again already." It was their inside joke, their shared moment from that day she fainted the first time. But now those words meant something entirely different. Before she could respond, he stepped outside into the violet dawn. The next morning, the cafe felt different. Empty, quiet, slower. Tarala stood by the window where he used to sit, the coin resting in her palm. The city outside sparkled with movement, but her gaze stayed fixed on the sky, where a single human transport ship rose like a silver star, cutting through the clouds toward the unknown. She whispered softly, "Two impossible things, Holt." Her breath fogged the glass, then she smiled, though her eyes were wet, and to humans who never stopped trying. Weeks later, travelers still talked about the human who drank Karoth essence and lived. The story became legend, a tale told with laughter and disbelief. But for Tarala, it wasn't just a story. It was a memory, a reminder that sometimes strength wasn't about surviving the easy days. It was about daring to live through the hard ones. Every evening she would polish the counter, wipe the tables, and glance at that empty seat by the window. She'd imagine him sitting there again, smiling that small human smile and saying, "You can do it again already." And every time she heard those words in her mind, she felt braver. She spoke a little louder. She dreamed a little bigger, because somewhere out there among the stars, a human was still walking into new storms and smiling through them. And maybe one day, when he returned, she'd have a cup waiting for him. The end.